Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.
Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Sarah Fensky. Jackie Robinson famously integrated Major League Baseball in 1947. He joined the National League's Brooklyn Dodgers that April, and the American League followed a few months later when the Cleveland Indians put Larry Doby into the lineup. But right behind Cleveland were the St. Louis Browns. Just 12 days later, the team fielded its first black player. And 2 days after that, it became the first team to put 2 black players into a game. It would take the St. Louis Cardinals another 7 years to integrate. And here today to talk to us about that story is Ed Wheatley. He gives a talk on this subject this Thursday at the Maplewood Public Library. And his new book, Baseball in St. Louis, also deals with the topic. It comes out April 1st. So, Ed, welcome to the show.
Glad to be back.
Ed, you were telling me some East Coast sports writers had speculated that St. Louis was too southern to put black players on the field, and yet the Browns jumped in right after Cleveland. Why was that?
Well, I think that it's really a compliment to Bill DeWitt Sr., who the father of the current Cardinal owner. He was the general manager and was about to assume ownership of the team, and he was looking for the best players possible. And, you know, just as the Dodgers had looked at the Kansas City Monarchs, he looked at the Kansas City Monarchs and brought Willard, Brown, and Hank Thompson over to the Browns.
This was from a Negro League team there
in
Kansas City.
The Kansas City Monarchs were a Negro League team. Larry Doby came from the Newark Eagles.
So what kind of reaction did these 2 black players get from St. Louis fans?
You know, St. Louis always likes good baseball, but you also got to remember St. Louis, which is the irony of the whole thing, you know, the most southern team in Major League Baseball, along with the Cardinals, did this advance. You know, and it was a time where, you know, they were starting. The world had changed with World War II. We're in post-World War II, where blacks and whites had come together to work on the factories and on the war fronts. So it was happening. It was evolving. So there was more. But that didn't mean there weren't still rednecks and people, you know, who were upset. But, you know, it was a thing where Bill DeWitt looked at it and said, "Look, I want good players. Here's 2 good players." Secondly, he reached out to say, we've got empty seats in Sportsman's Park, and we have a large African-American community here in St. Louis. We'll bring in some black players, and they will perhaps come to the games. And he did something different than was done in the others. He brought 2 because he felt it would be easier if they had someone together. And I remember Bill DeWitt Jr. telling me his dad said, you know, that's the reason I did it. And Bill Jr. was on the field that first day as a bat boy, and he says, you know, I looked out and I saw the 2 of them standing together in left field. And he said, I thought that was nice they had someone with each other they could talk. It didn't mean there was, you know, buddy. There was a time like that, but that was, you know, across. And that's the bad thing about this is that, you know, nobody supports the St. Louis Browns. The Baltimore Orioles have nothing to do with this team. And these things of this team's history, like this, is one of the most important.
This was a proud moment.
It's a proud moment in our society, and nobody really toots the horn, you know, and that's what we try to do.
Let's bring back that history. Now, Willard Brown, he became the first black player to hit a home run in American League history. But I understand the team still released him in pretty short order. What happened there?
Well, you know, Willard Brown hit an inside-the-park home run off Hal Newhouser of the Tigers. And, you know, Willard did not perform up to this challenge. Willard had a different personality. I mean, there were times they would talk about he would be out in left field and he'd pull a Reader's Digest out and read it out during the games.
Was he just a laid-back kind of guy?
He was very laid-back, but he was also somewhat of a chip on his shoulder about the conditions in Major League Baseball. He felt he was more of an equal and a better player in the Negro Leagues. You know, Hank Thompson came and he played well. You know, both of them hit above the Browns team average, but there was also, you got to remember the Browns' financial situation. And there was a stipulation that's been told that if they would have kept these 2 gentlemen for the rest of the season, and been on the roster the last day, they would have had to pay a very large amount of money to the Kansas City Monarchs, so they released them both. And Hank Thompson went on to the New York Giants, the first man to segregate two teams, and he was
integrate two teams.
Integrate two teams, and he was a World Series hero in two of their World Series.
It's interesting. Thompson, he was 21 when the Browns
youngest man to
integrate. That must have been so much pressure for him. How did he hold up to that?
Well, I think there was two parts to it too. You know, both of these gentlemen were in the military. You know, Willard Brown was at Normandy, and
so they were
Thompson
used to some
had
serious
been in the
pressure.
Battle of the Bulge. So they had been through that. They had been through the competitive nature of Negro League baseball, and it was, it was just, hey, they were there to play baseball. Hank performed much better than Willard. Even though we talk about Willard's home run, but it was, and the thing of it is, Willard is inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame out of this. Mainly for his role in the Negro Leagues and the Caribbean Leagues. But it was, you just got to think the immense pressure. And then Hank Thompson, his career, every time he's the first African American to face a black pitcher when he faced Don Newcombe when he went to the Giants. He's the first to play with two players here. In the 54 World Series, when Don Mueller gets hurt, he moves to the outfield, forms the first all-black outfield. So, I mean, there is so much about this gentleman that he integrates two teams. And all these firsts, almost everything he does, yet he's forgotten.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of amazing. And part of what is also so interesting hearing you talk about all the first embodied in this one young man is it seems like there were just kind of a handful of teams that were integrating it first and then later this big groundswell. How long did it take for Major League Baseball to be truly integrated?
Well, I mean, that's one of the things in all my talks I always talk about. Hey, you go back into fifth grade history and in eighth grade history, American history, you would always hear about Boston being the cradle of democracy, the beacon on the hill, and was the Boston Red Sox. 1959 was the last team to integrate with Pumpsie Green. So, I mean, hear this, you think the most southern city has two. 15 years later, the most liberal Democratic seat in the world is the last.
It took them the longest.
Yes, it did.
Why did it take them so long? Any theories on that?
Well, Tom Yawkey, the owner, baseball has come out now and taken away a few things. They've changed the name of the street outside Fenway Park and some of the things inside because there are those who, claim he was a very outspoken racist.
Okay.
And so, those attitudes are judged now and looked at, and they're trying to rectify. So some of it was the ownership, but then you would say, well, how did the town of Boston let it accept? I mean, because Boston's a rich baseball town. When everybody else is bringing forth these African American players, why was Boston last? And
let's go back to St. Louis for a moment. The Cardinals they didn't integrate till 1954. What took them so long after the Browns had blazed this trail?
Well, the thing of it is that baseball did not quickly adapt. It was the Dodgers, then it was Cleveland Indians, and it was the Browns, and then the Giants. And, after 3 years, the 47, 48, and 49 season, there was only 11 black players out of, the 16 teams. That's, do the math there. That's hundreds of playing opportunities, and there was only 11 players. So, baseball did not react quickly. Some of it was just the policies of the teams, and what had happened even before that, the tone had kind of been set by Judge Kennesaw Mountain Landis, who was the commissioner. He was a very much against the integration of baseball, and then he had died in late 1944, and that's when things started moving. The Dodgers signed Jackie Robinson in 1946, sent him to Montreal to be prepared to come up so that when he come in, he was ready. He wasn't going to fail. And the irony of it was the man Branch Rickey sent was his right-hand man, George Sisler, a former Brown. He's the one who mentored Jackie in Montreal and got him ready to come in so he wouldn't fail. And the other thing was the manager of the Brooklyn Dodgers was the former Browns catcher when Branch Rickey was here. So there's all these Brown
The Browns have so many connections to
and
this.
then you can throw in Bill Veeck when he signed Larry Doby, and then he would sign Satchel Paige and that. he would come to the Browns, and he would bring Satchel Paige to the Browns with him in 1951.
So I'm glad you mentioned that. I feel like Satchel Paige, such a superstar, and he did have this stint with the Browns. How did that go?
Well, it did. I mean, here's a guy in his late 40s, and he makes 2 All-Star team appearances for the Browns. I mean, Satchel is, by many people's view, the greatest pitcher of all time. He was just phenomenal. And we actually just had our roundtable Saturday. I mean, and Ed Mickelson.
This is for the St. Louis Browns
Historical Society. And Ed Mickelson, one of our living former players, was just like telling Satchel Paige stories because the guy, he could do anything. And the thing of it was, people forget, we're talking 1952 and 53. In 1965, he made a comeback under Charlie Finley of the Athletics in Kansas City and pitched 3 shutout innings of 1-hit ball. And the only guy who got a hit was Carl Yastrzemski, who happened to.
And sorry, how old was he at this point when he made this comeback?
In his late 50s.
In his late 50s.
Yeah.
I feel like none of us have any excuse in light of that. That's amazing.
You just need to go read some Satchel Paige. He's got his life stories, how to stay young and vigorous.
Well, so Ed, in addition to all the work that you've done to remember the history of the Browns and promote that legacy here, you're currently working to promote the history of black baseball stars in St. Louis as a whole.
Correct.
Why is that work important to you?
Well, it's history. It's a forgotten history. It's an area that hasn't really been tapped well. I mean, there's just so much rich history of how the African-American experience in baseball is great and strong. We had the Tandy Leagues up in North St. Louis, which were kind of the amateur, the semi-pro leagues that were kind of like the minor leagues to the Negro Leagues. And then we had such great history of the Negro Leagues with the St. Louis Giants that then became the Stars. They won 3 world championships. Every time you drive down to Busch Stadium and you drive down Highway 4064 and you cross Compton, you see Harris Stowe College right next to Chaffetz, and that's the field. That was Stars Park right there, and that, we still play baseball out on that field. And on Saturday, April 25th, we're going to have a big ceremony marking the 100th anniversary of the Negro Leagues down at the Harris Stowe Park as part of their doubleheader. The team will be playing, and we got some ceremonies that we'll be doing.
The Browns Historical Society is a part of that?
Part of that. Our St. Louis Sabre organization's part of it, and the Negro Baseball League Museum in Kansas City is a part of it. So we're all coming together to remember this experience because it's something that, I think our African-American community don't realize this history. Mm-hmm. They are not really playing baseball as much as other ethnic groups, and it's something that we want to work towards not forgetting, just as the Browns are forgotten, the Stars, the Giants, all these pieces of history are forgotten.
Well, author Ed Wheatley, I want to thank you so much for joining us today and for that work you're doing to remember that important history.
Thank you.
Ed's new book comes out April 1st. It's called Baseball in St. Louis, and his talk at the Maplewood Public Library on the integration of the St. Louis Browns team. It's free and opens to the public. It's this Thursday from 6:30 to 7:30. And we have a quick reminder, in addition to listening to St. Louis on the Air on the radio or through our podcast, you can also connect with our production team on Facebook. Search for St. Louis on the Air there and request to join that group. We get a lot of good story ideas from there and promote what's coming up next. So please join us. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.
St. Louis Public Radio's The Gateway gives you the day's news first thing every weekday morning. From the ever-evolving relationship between St. Louis City and County to developments in the Missouri and Illinois state capitals and reports from our correspondents in Rolla and the Metro East. We put it all in a roughly 10-minute package with clarity and context. Download The Gateway wherever you get podcasts.